Nice way to look at it. And that will bring us to the end of this Asia Today's edition. I'm Jun Beijing. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
What stood out from Li Keqiang's press conference today?
As an old citizen of Beijing, we are most concerned about environmental decline. He says the most brilliant scientists and engineers will be organized by the government to figure out what's behind the creation of the hazardous fog in Chinese Wumai that plagues most of northern and northeastern China, whatever the costs. Secondly, like all politicians around the world, the Chinese government has been very proud of the creation of up to 13 million jobs last year, and this year 11 million would be created. That's miraculous given the adversity of the global circumstances. And he safeguarded the spirit of massive entrepreneurship and innovation, which has brought about the boom of e-commerce. That's a very typical Chinese economic phenomenon and a miracle. Lastly, he dismissed the talk on hard landing as nonsense. He said there would be no such things as systematic financial risks.
Sounds
he's
good.
very
Still
confident.
show about it.
Yeah, he's very confident.
During his annual news conference on March the 15th, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said that there is little risk of a hard landing for the Chinese economy, and the Chinese government has targeted its economic growth of around 6.5% or higher, if possible, in 2017. How could China achieve its economy target this year, and why are some observers in the West still skeptical about China's governing system, although it has proven very effective? To discuss these issues and more, today I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Harvey Zordin, columnist for China Daily.
The Chinese ship of state, after observing the two sessions, can say that it's on course and steady as it goes.
And Zhang Jianping, Director General with the Center for Regional Cooperation, or CAITAC.
Two sessions are very critical and essential for China's legislation, social and economic development. International society also are focusing on what will be happened in 2017 for China.
We shall also speak to Keshe Mabubani, Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore, on the telephone. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Gentlemen, within 2 hours and a half almost, Premier Li Keqiang answered 18 questions in the press conference. That's an annual event organized for him towards the end of the Lianghui plenary sessions, NPC and CPPCC. I wonder if you were following the press conference, and if so, what were the major points that you think are very important for the sustainable development of China?
Well, first of all, I was very impressed with the Premier's command of facts and figures and the conceptual framework that he described. I was especially impressed because I worry about it a lot, the U.S.-China relationship, and he was very positive about the hopefully upcoming meeting with President Donald Trump, because if China and the U.S. can iron out some of the differences that it has, it means win-win both for China and the U.S. If not, I think there's rough seas ahead for both countries. I was also very impressed with the fact that he did talk about growing innovation and about trying to maintain this very delicate balance in terms of growth at 6.5% or a little better, and also to do that maintaining employment and also maintaining growth and maintaining social stability.
In his response to a question from CNN on U.S.-China relationship, what impressed me, who was also following the media briefing, was Premier Li Keqiang says whoever gets elected, U.S.-China relationship is mature enough to withstand the impact, negative impact of China bashing on the campaign trail. What do you think is the most important bedrock for this most important relationship in the 21st century between two major economies, China and the United States?
Yeah. This time, the press conference very interesting. You know that in the past, actually, this type of press conference, firstly, will focusing on China's economic growth rate or China's economic transition, mainly focusing on domestic issues. But this time, the first issue, related with China-U.S. relationship. So that shows actually both from Chinese side and from the U.S. side and from international society, all of us, appreciate China-U.S. relationship, including diplomatic relationship, economic relationship, how to, provide, public goods and security in the region, especially in Asia-Pacific region. For China-U.S. relationship, from economic aspect, that I often had a kidding with those scholars. I said that for China, when our Chinese economy has a problems, we will check ourselves. So maybe our economic model has a problem, or we need to restructure China's economy. But from United side, they just blame on China, Germany, Japan. So I think that I hope that the U.S. can keep an objective attitude on their own problems. Of course,
you mean the United States has been deflecting criticisms instead of focusing its own some of the vulnerabilities of the U.S. economy and perhaps institutions at this moment?
I think today the problems happened in the U.S. caused by U.S. economic structure. They, in the past...
Zaldin, what do you think of the American economic structure? He said there's something terribly wrong with that.
Well, I think we're both undergoing change. The change in both of our countries is that we're moving or have moved from an industrial Rust Belt kind of manufacturing society to a service sector.
But the issue is whether jobs would go back to the United States given the high labor costs in the United States.
I think you can compare Germany and the U.S. All of those two countries are belonging to developed economies, but in Germany, 30% of their GDP from manufacturing sectors, but in the U.S. only 15%. In the past, U.S. more relying on service sectors. Many manufacturing sectors escaped from the U.S. and caused jobless issues. In this regard, I think that the U.S. make manufacturing sectors back to the U.S. That's a right direction.
You put your finger on a very important point on the use of labor force in a developing country, which is controversially still the biggest developing country, because Jack Ma says that the age of internet will soon be replaced by artificial intelligence. Does that mean the widespread use of robots, and will that be very harmful for the labor force? Because we still boast of the largest labor force, despite the fact that we are getting old.
I think that in some of high-tech sectors, it would be possible. Also, for those maybe automakers, and you can use robots. But even if for mobile, you know that it's not easy to use robots, because for mobile, every year, maybe at most 2 years, you need to have a new version and a new technology. And then it would be impossible to, when you produce your robots, but you have to change your techniques and production lines. That's why, I don't think robots can replace, all of those workers, and especially for some of traditional, sectors. Also, many workers will be needed.
Well, the social stability in China is very much guaranteed by massive employment instead of the other way around. Last year, for example, 13 million jobs were created, and this year 11 million more would have to be created for university students. Now, so the United States has been proud of having the most developed service industry, and even proud of the financial derivatives of Wall Street Journal, but that wreaked havoc back in the year 2008. So what do you think should be the lessons that the United States should learn? And I believe it's still licking the wounds.
I think that we have to do more in terms of the science and technology. We're moving in that direction. I think that it's a dream that President Trump has, that he's going to return large numbers of jobs to America that have gone overseas. And the point of the situation is today that the world's interconnected. We're not little islands. We're all connected. And for China and U.S., we're like Siamese twins. We're completely joined together. So I think the bottom line is, as Premier Lee said today, that both sides will lose if there's economic warfare. So I'm really hopeful in April, if the two presidents get together, that we can do some significant cooperation agreements.
But I'm afraid President Xi Jinping won't play golf, unlike Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, because President Xi is a super fan of soccer, football. I don't know whether they're going to talk about football.
And he won't become begging like Abe did either. He's going to come and go man to man with President Trump.
Well, I would like to talk to Professor Keshu Mahbubani, a very important, renowned scholar who is known for the rest of the world for safeguarding Asian values and indeed the roadmap of Singaporean development. My first question for him is, Professor Keshu Mahbubani, many observers in China say that they don't think a watchful and skeptical society, particularly Western countries, are ready to recognize China as a rising power because they accuse China of being assertive. And therefore, they argue that China doesn't have a model that can be easily accepted by the rest of the world. They are highly skeptical as to the sustainability and resilience of the Chinese way of development. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm glad you used the word assertive and not aggressive, because there's a big difference between being assertive and being aggressive. In fact, I wrote a column for that on Financial Times. It is quite normal for a rising power to become more assertive. But as long as the rising power is not aggressive, and certainly not aggressive militarily, then I think the world can live with an assertive China. Although, of course, it is in China's interest to make sure that as it continues to rise peacefully, the others accept China's peaceful rise. And China must get used to the fact that the Western world is, of course, deeply troubled by the rise of China.
But what do you think? What do you think should be the model of China? That's the key word.
Well, I think the important thing for China to do is to deliver continuous and stable economic growth. Because when you do that, when you lift your people out of poverty, when you create the world's largest middle class, you are serving as a model for other countries who are trying to achieve the same thing. And you know, today at a time when the developed countries, the middle classes feel very uncertain for the future, it is quite amazing that in Asia there's so much confidence in the future. And in fact, to give you one statistic,
the rapid economic expansion of China has been made possible under the strong leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this one-party political institutions are not politically correct in the West. However, such institutions do work and work effectively in China. But this sounds a little bit unacceptable for the West. Using the experiences and institutions of Singapore, can you argue with the West?
Oh, I mean, as you know, I argue with the West all the time. And I tell the West that we are moving from what I call a mono-civilizational world to a multi-civilizational world. And the West was very arrogant in believing that the only way for countries to progress is to copy either the American or the European systems and become liberal democratic societies. And I think one thing China has shown is that you can grow and prosper and succeed with a different governance system. But of course, as you know, even within China, China's political system has been changing, has been evolving. When I first went to China in 1980, there were no Chinese tourists leaving China. Today, there are over 100 million Chinese tourists leaving China. So you have reformed and transformed your system in the economic, political, and social dimensions in many significant ways. So as long as you continue to grow and succeed in a peaceful and stable fashion, the world should look at your model as a potential model to learn from.
Well, that's my talk with Professor Kishore Mahbubani with the School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Now, gentlemen, Premier Li Keqiang said at the press conference that the talk on having the hard landing in the Chinese economy is nonsense. Now, he also said dismissively that there would be no such things like systematic financial risks. Because he said, we haven't used all the instruments or tools in the box yet. Why do you think Premier Li Keqiang came across as so confident?
Well, I think it's partly being a political leader, and he has to be positive to let the people know that there's a good chance of a positive outcome. But I don't believe that he can say with 100% certainty that that's going to be the case. What China's trying to do with maintaining 6.5% GDP growth is not easy. You need 6.4 to 6.5% to maintain employment at the desired level. You also don't want to have too much inflation. You also want to make sure that there's enough jobs for people. And so it's like playing three-dimensional chess. And the outcome, I think, is far from certain. But you have to give the government a lot of credit for trying to ensure that there will be a softer landing.
While China is hailed as a guardian protecting free trade and globalization, some of the tough questions coming from the Western media at the press conference are focused on why we are so reluctant, it seems, to reform the SOE, the state-owned enterprises. What do you think of the relationship between the government and the state-owned enterprises?
I don't think this type of saying is right, from Western media, because in recent years, if you look at China's SOE reform, step by step, we are promoting. Especially in recent 2 years, if you look at some of, very huge SOE, some of them combined, and some of them actually have merge and acquisition cases. So that's why if you look at China's SOE numbers belonging to central government, in the past, more than 100. But now, maybe just, more than 80.
We understand, Professor Zhang, that China relied on the SOE heavily in times of crisis because their contributions of taxes will be very steady.
But today...
It could be guaranteed today, however.
Today...
when CEOs of the SOEs, their salaries are cut by half in the against the backdrop of the high-handed crackdown on corruption. What do you think of the rewarding system? Without the motivation, can those CEOs work hard enough? What do you think of the brain drain coming from the SOE to the non-public sector?
Yeah, this is a complicated issue. It's because different SOE have different situation and different profit performance. So in this regard, I think this type of things belonging to SASAC, because SASAC will provide rules and regulations for SOEs, salaries and their, human resources management, something like that. But I like to say today SOE and the private sectors actually contributed to China's economy half and half. And in this regard, but from SOE side, in the past, due to lack of reform, actually gradually SOE's performance, slow down. So in the future, in order to stimulate SOE performance better, that means we have to have new, countermeasures and new rules and regulations.
Motivations should be strong enough to drive the SOE development. What do you think of the success, quote unquote, of a privatization program of the Thatcher years in Britain in the 1980s?
There was success, but with a lot of pain. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people were unhappy. They didn't call her the Iron Lady for nothing. In China, you've been moving steadily from 100% SOE economy to now a mixed economy. I personally believe that that movement has to continue, because I do think that SOEs can never be as efficient as private, enterprise-oriented, free competition businesses. So I think that this kind of model has to keep moving in the direction of a free market and other Chinese companies competing with each other, because that guarantees greater efficiency.
Do you both agree that what happened over the past 3 decades in our reform and opening up is that very much about how to decentralize the powerful functions of the central government? However, today, Premier Li Keqiang surprised observers by saying that more needs to be done to further streamline the administrative procedures and scale back government controls to unleash economic vitality. What was he referring to?
In China now, generally speaking, actually central government and the local government are very powerful. Sometimes they will, intervene, market behavior, and market efficiency will be, seriously impacted. So in this regard,
I'm afraid, the strong argument of the liberals who are so critical of the intervention by the central authorities.
Yeah, but one good case is Zhejiang province. If you look at Zhejiang province, actually they lack of resources. There are so a lot of mountain areas, but their economic growth driving force, their trade volume actually in front of all of those provinces. So in Zhejiang province, their government actually mainly focusing on how to provide service for those local private enterprises, and how to make administration procedures more simplified, and how to improve service efficiency. So in this regard, I think that primarily actually has a very clear direction. That is, both central government and the local government need to reduce their administration procedures, so a lot of licensing, so a lot of certifications, something like that. Especially in the future, China's economy will mainly rely on service sector. Today, China's service sector's contribution to GDP only 51%, but average level in the world 60%. So that's why today China has to stimulate service sector's development, but service sector will seriously rely on rules and regulations, governmental administration. So in this regard, reform has to be promoted rapidly.
Are you aware why and how e-commerce has thrived in China over the past few years, particularly in the context of the role of the government? Because Li Keqiang, our premier, was talking about how to cut or further cut bureaucratic red tapes to ensure the success of massive entrepreneurship and the spirit of innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to get rid of barriers to entry. And as you were saying a moment ago, if you have too much bureaucracy, people are not going to want to come in, or they're going to say it's too much trouble. China's known for bureaucracy, and people still think that there's too much. The American Chamber of Commerce in China did a survey late last year, and 80-some% of I think 81% of American businesses feel there's too much red tape and too much bureaucracy here. And the Premier today talked about a case where a company needed 100 approvals. If you want to encourage entrepreneurship. You have to give people the opportunity to get in there and fight in the marketplace and in the marketplace of ideas. And China has some things to really be proud of, things like WeChat and Alibaba. We need more of those in this country and in the world.
You need why we've been able to reduce bureaucratic red tapes, because we have learned so much from the success of the Silicon Valley in the United States, where you have minimized the intervention from local governments. Having said this, what do you think of the driving force for the creation of 11 million jobs this year? I mean, that's a lot for politicians.
Yeah, this is a tough question and a tough mission in China. For more than 10 million, new job opportunities, more than 70% will for those students from college and universities. So for those big population, I can't imagine, you can make them, work in factory or in plant. Just a part of them will like this type of job. So that means most of them will be focusing on, new creation. And that's why in recent years, we have to encourage creation and innovation in China. Meanwhile, I think that in the future, service sectors and high-tech sectors will provide enough space, for China's new young generations. Even if for those immigrants, young immigrants from rural area to urban areas, today they are more like to work in service sectors, including business service, other service sectors.
But I'm afraid I'm a little bit skeptical. I somehow disagree with you, Professor Zhang, because we were talking about the advent of artificial intelligence. I wonder if labor-intensive industries will soon be phased out with the use of robots and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, but you know that that's artificial intelligence mainly used in manufacturing sectors, but in service sectors still relying on many labor forces, especially if you look at, for example, tourist sectors. That's relying on so lot of human resources. Also, tourists can as sector, they can drive so lot of other sectors, including agriculture sectors, manufacturing sectors, other service sectors development. According to relative statistics, more than 108 subsectors will be driven forced by tourist sectors.
I wonder if you guys have been roaming the streets during the period of Liang Hui. We were able to enjoy such beautiful blue skies. Premier Li Keqiang did talk about environmental protection. He said the most brilliant scientists will be organized to figure out why there has been massive hazardous fog plaguing much of northern and eastern China, whatever the costs. The government doesn't talk about money. Money is not the issue. The issue is we should figure out why. And do you trust the determination and political will of Chinese politicians?
Obviously, and he said that it's going to take a long time to solve this problem.
It takes time.
It takes a lot of time. But I think that that's true. It does take time. But I think what his motivation is, that the whole 2 sessions, to me, were about not only growth, but stability. People are unhappy about the smog. Many foreigners have left or left places, high smog
Gary
places.
Locke, your former ambassador, beat an early retreat along with the family. What a shame.
Environmental issues actually caused by China's industrialization process, especially in China now, more than 40% of China's GDP from manufacturing sectors. So in that progress, pollutants will be produced. Another is China's urbanization. Today, just half of Chinese living in urban areas, but in developed countries, maybe 80%, even higher a little bit.
Are you talking about New Yorkers?
Yeah, in the future, I think that we will reduce manufacturing sectors. Also, we will gradually complete our urbanization process, and will be gradually reduced. But one thing is very critical, that is environmental technology improvement will be largely used in China, accelerate environmental protection.
We have to be very innovative in the use of green technology and green energy. With that, we come to the end of this last edition of our Liang Hui coverage, Voices to Vote. Thank you for being with us. Until next time, goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello, you're watching The World Today from CGTN. I'm Jeff Moody in Beijing. We begin tonight's programme in Beijing, where the annual session of the National People's Congress came to a final meeting on Wednesday.